In the last lesson, we were talking about adding some details to our objects, but without actually adding the geometry. But what if we need some real bump on our objects? Let's take a look at the material output for a while. In the previous lesson, we used normal maps to connect the texture to the principled shader. And it was important to connect the normal output to the normal input to achieve a nice surface detail. But for displacement, we need to use displacement, not normal anymore. It's still a vector value, but it's interpreted a little bit differently. We need to use other kind of texture too, called height or bump map. Maybe you already saw it, but I subdivided the plane quite a few times because our details need some geometry. So let's drag the height texture into the shader editor and see how it looks. I will go to the material view and then Ctrl-Shift on the texture. As you can see, it's just a grayscale texture with not that many details. Let's change it to non-color and now we see even less details, but let's use a displacement node from Shift-A, Vector, Displacement, connect it to the material output, and plug the texture to the height input. And nothing happened. It's because in most cases we need a modifier called adaptive subdivision. It uses tessellation to dynamically subdivide a 3D model's surface during rendering. This process increases detail by creating smaller polygons in areas closer to the camera or where high detail is needed, while reducing subdivisions in distant or less detailed areas. To use it, we need to switch the feature set option in the render properties to experimental, and then from the modifiers, select Generate Subdivision Surface. If we still can see it, it's probably because of the Smooth by Angle modifier, so let's delete it. And now the Adaptive Subdivision option appeared, so let's turn it on. Nothing changed, and it's because Blender wants us to visit another option and change it, so let's go to the Material Properties, scroll down, and in the Settings tab, we need to change the displacement to Displacement Only. And now we can see the bump. Let's quickly switch to the modifiers and you can see the dicing scale value. It is a value that describes how much the surface will be divided. Lower values are better, but be aware that this method of adding geometry is very heavy and sometimes it might even crash your file if you set the value to a too small one. Let's go to the render properties for a second and scroll to the subdivision tab. Here we have the options both for the viewport and the render, and you can select the camera, which will show us the displacement, and set the off-screen scale for the elements outside the camera view to be less subdivided. I don't really recommend using subdivision with value bigger than 5, but you can set the maximum subdivisions here too. The default value of 12 is crazy, but feel free to experiment. Now we need to adjust the scale in the displacement node and the mid-level to put it where it was originally, so a little bit lower. We can also add a normal map. I will press Ctrl-Shift and T again while the principled shader is active and import the normal map. And this is definitely more interesting than just a plain color. In Eevee, we have a true displacement and we'll switch the engines real quick. Eevee doesn't support adaptive subdivision, but it used the subdivision modifier that we set in cycles. We don't even have to change anything because after switching the engines, we see that the result looks very good. Now let's talk about what file types we should use for different textures.